All right, 1-8 has notch, and this would really be the first introduction to a linear pattern. And one of the things with the linear sketch pattern, or using it in two directions, becomes like an array, is that this middle circle that's missing, I'm going to go ahead and leave it. I'm going to make it construction geometry rather than disrupt the pattern. If I delete it, then it's deleted, and I don't know if I'm going to need it or do anything with it. So we are new. Let's see, we made a part inch fractional last time, so I will go ahead and use my my template. Did anybody try templates? Yeah, well, okay. So if you make the templates, just stick to the basics and things that you would like to see when you open up the file. That's kind of the target right now. So one of the commands that I mentioned, but we really didn't do anything with, was and now I have to look for it, under Tools, Sketch Tools, Jogline. And Jogline I don't use very much, but I like to point it out because there are instances where it is pretty handy. So if I go into Jogline and pick this line, wait for it to catch up to me, and then drag. I don't think I dragged far enough. All right, let's try that again. Tools, Sketch Tools, Jogline, wait for it. There we go. I'm left clicking, holding down, and dragging the rectangle so that when I click again, it trims out the in between and gives me the 3 lines. Probably took as long to go find the command as it would to draw the 3 lines and trim it out or leave it split entities, whatever. All right, so not a big deal, but if you were doing a lot of these, it is a handy method of going about it. All right, so I picked my inch fraction knowing full well that this was in millimeters, grams, and seconds. So we're going to go back in, and 40 millimeters. And then we played around with the font, so I'm going to have to go back and update my font again because I don't think it was very readable on the video. And then we have a choice to make. Do I want to make this line and this line equal? Do I want individual dimensions? Do I want this line and this line equal? Because basically 120 divided by 3, I'm going to get 40 no matter how I go about it. So I'm doing the select, hold down the control button and select, and I'm going to set those two to equal. Depth then is 20. What do we have? 70 and 100. And then a height. All right, so we're back to the smart dimension that says if we stay close to the line, we will get a linear distance, a length. If I go out vertical, I will get the vertical. If I go horizontal, I'll get a horizontal, but it'll be in conflict because 70 and 30 already equals 100. I've got 100 there. So we're coming back out to the vertical that we actually do need, and that becomes 20. All right, so making these equal, I'm doing a select and control select of the points, and if I make those vertical and then the line equal, I don't know if that logic's going to play out, but it saves me a dimension. All right, so the issue with the equal may be that I get it off a different direction and it would still be equal and satisfy the relations, but not really be the solution that I want. The other thing that would happen if I were to allow it to infer a perpendicular, right? So if I were to see a perpendicular sign in there, then these would automatically go to 90 degrees, and it doesn't really look like they might be, but it doesn't really look like they're 90 degrees. So let's go ahead and extrude this out to the 12 millimeters. Open up a new sketch on the face. and I'm going to position the first hole location. So one of the things with the linear sketch pattern is it will get you 90–95% of the way there. And let's see, it's dimensioned off of the other side, but either one should work. So 20. And 20, and then a diameter of 20. Okay, so that gets my first instance in location. And then I could go ahead and draw, copy, whatever we need to produce the rest. But we have, I'm going to pre-select, so I'm pre-selecting the circle, linear sketch pattern. And then the X distance will be 40 millimeters. And the vertical distance will be, so there's just two of those, 0 degrees. I'm going to tell it to go ahead and dimension for the X spacing. So I will get a center line between the 2 points and a dimension. But one of the things it doesn't do is tell that that center line is horizontal. It shows that it's 0 degrees, but it's kind of like entering values. It's there, but it's not there. Y-axis does not become active until I give it more than one instance. So as soon as I tell it 3 and we give it 40 millimeters, then I have access to those as well. And we can dimension for the Y spacing. Okay, so that gives me a pattern of 6. I only need 5. So be aware at the bottom I could go instances skip and I could pick, now let's go ahead and click in it, I could pick the little magenta dot and that circle would go away. Well, when I'm doing patterns, I don't know that at some point I won't need that pattern or I won't need that circle. So my preference is to go ahead and just make that a construction geometry. And also, since that one, because I told it to do the Y dimensioning, it got the center line. So since the center line and the instance count, so we have a couple pieces of data here. And if we grab that center line, then it's capable of moving. That's really what I need to make vertical. If I delete that circle, then the center line is just kind of hanging there. So, it's, and that one actually, it didn't go horizontal, but it did something because it went fully defined. Point being that with the linear sketch pattern, with the circular sketch pattern, there's usually one dimension, one relation that you're going to have to add manually to get it to complete. And it didn't show up perpendicular. And then for our in condition, we'll just go through all, so it finds the next, or finds the back, and that goes through. So if you're still working up into chapter 2 where everything's in one sketch, this is probably the time to kind of make the jump into, let's make a solid, let's do a second cut extrude, because we're going to build on those geometries as we go, and not everything's going to be able to just go out of one sketch. All right, so we'll save that, 1-8. If I can find it again. Yeah, should have looked. Oh, I did put it in Dropbox. I got to remember to put it in. Put it into my Dropbox. There we go. And we'll pick one of those and go to 8. Okay, going back. The dreaded 1-9. Alright, so looking at 1-9 and seeing that there's not really given a center point, this screams 3-point arc. That you will generate the geometry that you do have information for, we'll connect the dots and we'll come up with something something in between. And this is in millimeters, so new, part metric. I'll stay with the front plane, and then line and line. Alright, so a 3-point arc has the added condition that you have to finish the arc. So I have an endpoint, I'm dragging to the other endpoint. It stays in that blue dashed line because there are still solutions. We can go this way, we can go that way, we can make it bigger and smaller, but we want it to look something about like that. All right, now when I go through and apply the dimensions, and we are 100 to the outside, the auto scale kicks in, 60 to the vertical, and then before I get too far away from it, we're going to go 58.31. All right, so that's an interesting number. And then this is where the driven dimensions come in. If I actually wanted to see what that location looks like, 49.88. For a number like that, I would have kind of expected that to be 30 and that to be 50. So whatever it's doing, it is kind of an odd X and Y location, but not a big deal. And thickness of 20. Open up the next sketch. Circle, circle, select. That one didn't stay selected, so select, hold down the control button and select, make those equal. Let's see, get into the dimensions, they're 15 in between, and 50 on the horizontal. And then 20 for the diameter. All right, and then the first one at 45. And 30 for the position. And then features, extrude cut, and we'll stay with through all. So through all says that if I had multiple bodies, if I had other geometry behind this stacked up, it would go through every one of them until it found the very last thing. If there were 20 of them, it would go through all 20 of those objects. Where I could go back and up to next. Up to next would find this back face, and that would be it. Through all both says go both directions, through all whatever you can find. Up to vertex is going to be an intersection, so any of the points where faces come together, so a corner. Up to surface, we would actually pick on the surface. Offset from surface would be able to translate maybe a curve. So if I was doing an extrusion and a regular boss extrusion and I wanted it to follow this curvature, I could put a pin through here and have it follow the same curvature. Offset it, or it would go through, and offset from surface would offset 100 thousandths, but it would maintain the surface that it was connected to or selected for. Up to body is any body that we have selected, and mid plane goes both directions, which is more of a probably is more of a boss base extrude. The one that I jump over and most of the time is closed is the from. And from would say that I could pick this sketch up and go from the sketch plane, offset some distance. So from this face, go on 20 millimeters, go 10 millimeters off of it and start. So I'd have just two little pockets. From a vertex, again, would select a corner. And then from the surface, face, or plane would be pick a face to start and then continue from that face. So the from we'll get into a little bit later, but just be aware that it is there as an option. If it's closed up, leave it closed up for now. All right, so those are going to go through as, or go in as through all. Okay, and that should be 1.9. Save. So again, I'm kind of doing these fast too. When you go back and watch this, think of it in terms of your workflow and your decisions. Is that you went through a certain process to generate this, whether it was from the previous videos or you tried it first, and you came up with a solution. As I'm fond of saying, I've had the advantage of I've done these a couple of times. So I'm making decisions from a position that I've seen this before. All right, the next one is P1-10, and we have all of the fun, so pretty much all angles. And it is in inches. So probably more so that just to pick something different, I'm going to put the origin on this point for no good reason other than that's where I want it. All right, so you're not always locked into picking a corner or a location. Do what's convenient, what makes sense for your geometry. So I don't know that this really makes sense, but it's my choice. And missed that one, no big deal. And what I'm kind of looking for as I go through, there would be one of those, showed it and then I lost it. Where did it go? Okay, so there would be a parallel. And that little parallel would force those two lines to go into parallel. And since they're vertical, it wouldn't cause me a whole lot of problems, but it could. And then if I come back and I know I saw a perpendicular, there was a perpendicular. So the line on the left that's highlighted in orange, that's going to infer. It's in yellow. I'm going to get that relation. It is going to apply it for me. And if I don't catch the orange and the yellow box with the perpendicular symbol in it, it's going to give it to me. So I'm going to go ahead and drop it so you can see perpendicular. All right, if I don't want that perpendicular, I'm now going to have to go back and remove it. Well, unfortunately, when I discover that it is interfering with going fully defined or I can't put that last dimension in, that's usually the time it shows up. So to get rid of it, we can come over and delete, or let me escape out of my selection. I can highlight the box in the work area and hit delete on the box. Now that one can go to vertical, and since I'm applying those, that one can go back to vertical as well. So if I recognize it, I'm going to clean up as I go. If I get to the point where I'm adding those dimensions and I'm starting to have problems, I saw a little perpendicular there, so I don't know which one. Okay, so that perpendicular, the yellow is vertical. The perpendicular is saying that yes, you are perpendicular to that object, but it's in white, so it's more of a reference. It's not an inference. I'm not going to automatically get perpendicular. Vertical kind of takes care of it. Horizontal and vertical imply that I will be perpendicular. It doesn't need to add it as another relation. And then connect the dots. It goes to the shaded. We're going to have enough fun here, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the shading off. And we're just going to go through and start applying dimensions. All right, 2.46 and 0.38. We have a decision to make. Is the stack up of our tolerance consistent with the rest of our parts? All right, 4.6 is not really a number, and since it's coming to a point, it kind of depends on what kind of angle it's generating. But 3.8, I recognize 0.38 as 375. If I have enough 0.38s, 5, 10, I'm going to gain 50 thousandths over 10 segments of that 5,000 shift, putting them in 0.38 rather than 0.375. So if your stack up of tolerances is critical, in this case I'm thinking it's not, but this is where I put that fraction to decimal scale on Canvas, recognizing some of those numbers, 8ths, 16ths, 30 seconds, a few 30 seconds, maybe 1 or 2 64ths. That will be something that you can recognize how the numbers repeat. So for this one, I'm going to say 0.38 is okay. But if I get over into the assembly and I start running into interferences, if I start running into stack up of tolerance issues, this is going to be a likely culprit. All right, so maybe there's 5 of these pieces stacked on top of each other that whatever they do, that when I get to the last one, my mating part is at a decimal plus or minus 5, but I've accumulated that 5 thousandths, and all of a sudden they don't all 10 parts don't fit into that piece. All right, so those are considerations as we go forward. And it's one of those, it's easy for me to say, but until you see it and experience it, I've had like 9/30 seconds, 0.28125. That fifth decimal place has bitten me when I've had enough elements or enough objects stacked up, and it added up to put me out of tolerance, out of my desired tolerance by 10 or 15 thousandths. All right, so 1.5, we have an overall of 3.84. So that one's into kind of the 30-second range. I'm not going to guess at it. Oh, don't need an E there. So if you do happen to hit a letter, it turns yellow and says, do you want this to be a global variable? And no, I do not want it to be a global variable. So we will bypass that. Make sure to backspace over the number. And put in number a little bit too big, so Control Z. 1.5. Half an inch. Back into my dimension. And where are we at? 1.25. 0.75. And then 1.5. So in a sense, this is a process of elimination. 4.75 is to the points. All right. So again, be careful with the points because they have the ability to rotate about that origin in a circular pattern. We have enough locked down here that if I bring this up and make sure that I'm in a horizontal location, that it shouldn't do anything strange. But again, I'm always a little bit wary when I have to go point to point. All right, so dimensions are not exactly the cleanest or in positions. They're not on top of each other, but they are readable. Inside of the sketch, I don't care. It's for creating the part. And as I started to say, this is basically a process of elimination. Get something related to the origin. Get your geometry in place. Start adding dimensions. Pay attention to the relations. And as you build in the relations that you can identify, then you switch over to dimensions. You get as many dimensions in as you can. And if it comes down to 1 or 2 blue dots or 1 or 2 blue lines, that's where you start dragging things to see how they react and what you can do to bring it to be fully defined. All right, and then this one is 0.6. And OK. So I haven't mentioned that SolidWorks will let you, I guess it's been for a few versions, you can save inside of the sketch. All right, previous you had to exit the sketch before it would let you save. I would still say that that is probably not a best practice. If you need to shut down, going ahead and creating the boss or going ahead and getting out of the sketch is probably a better practice. It kind of forces you to think about, yes, I am editing the sketch. I'm making these changes. It's not just there in front of you. And if this is going over to the assembly, getting out of, starting a habit of leaving the sketch open and then finding that you go into the assembly and, wow, where's my part? I've got this sketch thing going, or I've got this error because the rest of my geometry is not rebuilding correctly because one sketch was left open. So for the first chapter or so, it's not really a big deal. But as we move forward, I would say it's a habit that you don't want to get into, and if you started, it's a habit that you'd want to break pretty quick. Okay, 10 and 11. All right, so let's see, circles. I don't see anything in here that's, went into, all right, so that finished out. For chapter 1-1 was through 10. I had it split even 9 and 9, but Most everybody stopped at the end of the page anyway, so I just went ahead and made the first assignment through 1-10, and so the second picks up with 11, and we continue on from there. So I'm going to go ahead and see how far we get going through this, so you have these for your reference if you're still working on them, or as you go into the assignment due next week. All right, so still don't see anything major. I'm probably going to stay with these, just sketch these lines all the way around. We could do that jog line thing again, but like I said, I want to say I can draw it about as fast as I can go find the command and use it. So part metric, front plane, sketch. And again, I'm going to stay in the workflow that I'm used to. Keep in mind that you can come up to and go into the sketch. You can select the plane and go into the sketch. There's a couple of ways to do everything. Let's see, jumping into the line then, we're going to go this way, so over, up, looks something kind of like that. Back over, going to run out of space. That comes over. All right, so there's my horizontal, there's my blue reference line. Come over, come down. I'm kind of doing this fast too because I'm hoping that it will inject some of those common mistakes that pick up the perpendiculars, pick up parallels, but this one isn't complicated enough apparently, so yeah, I didn't get the ones that I thought I would. All right, so we're into a point where we can go ahead with dimensions, 30, 70, 10, depth is also 10. Let's see, we have an 80 going all the way across, and then 35. All right, so from the point, if I have to go to a point, again, if I have an object, then I will go between the two objects. In this case, I need to go to a point. The object kind of gives it a position to where it doesn't have the ability to rotate. It is in reference to a linear object, then it has to come off that point, and there's little chance of rotation. Let's see, 15, 15, and it works out that 50 to 65, 15. So I should be able to make all of those equal. And then one of them gets the dimension. And if I need to verify, we can highlight. And at the bottom of the status bar, length of 15 millimeters shows up at the very bottom. Anything that I can select that it can measure, I'm going to be able to see in this on the bottom status. Okay, so in that case, I've made a choice that whatever this stair step is, if it adjusts, all of them are going to adjust with it. If I find out that that was a mistake in my logic, then I'm going to have to go back and remove the equal or equals and dimension individually. But if I go back and check any of these dimensions, 50, let's see, will it give me between two objects? 65, I can verify pretty easily that I've created that geometry correctly. And I'll go ahead and put the circles in on this one. So circle, circle, dimension. So we have a 10 millimeter, we have a 20 millimeter. Oh good, I got a linear diameter. I've still haven't found why I'm getting the mod diameter, but in this case I have a leader that I did not want. So over on the leader tabs, we can go back and say that this is a diameter, this is a radius, or leave it as a linear. And then I want to say it's the extension line. Well, one of those is capable of rotating, but most of the time we're just going to go back to the diameter and place it. Center point and center point are going to be for our location, our position, vertical. Dimension is going to be between the two circles, and oops, one was 15, so never mind. Control Z. So from the top was 15, from the bottom then was 20. And then location was 30. Okay, and those go fully defined. So what you'll find is that chase, that game of getting it fully defined, is you're coming down to one or two items. So let's just go ahead and do the Control Z. And if I were to pick these, so grabbing the center point, even the circle is going to give me some information. If I grab the circle and nothing happens, it's not the diameter. We have a diameter dimension. If the diameter dimension wasn't there, then I would see my circle get bigger and smaller, and I would be able to see its location change as well. Since that one's moving with it, it's another piece of the puzzle giving me some information back to work from. And then because the center point is selected and then I went right to the perimeter, it automatically is trying to apply that dimension for me, and it says no, it can't, and that's okay. I'm just going to click out of it, make sure that nothing is pre-selected for that dimension, and apply the last two. Go into the extrusion, 20 millimeters, accept, save. Save. So I never did figure out why my Windows kicked out the Sin2 compressed file. The Windows knowledge base said repair your system, and it was, well, you guys just did the updates, so why should I have to repair an update? So maybe the next update they'll fix it for me. But if you we get to the point to where we're looking at those. Oops, not the downloads. Well, okay, hit everything except the one that I wanted, Dropbox. All right, so 1 through 10 was the assignment. Had a couple extra there. And send to, there should be compressed folder, and you would click on that compressed folder. I have WinRare. If you have 7Z, WinZip, all of those, something's going to be on this right mouse button to send it to, and we'd zip those up and then you could turn them in. There were several questions of if you finish chapter 1 and you turn them all in assignments 1 and 2 and you turn them all in the first assignment, that's fine. I'll find it, I'll put the points in on the next go around. Not a big deal. Okay. All right, 12 is the one that when, let's see, I still don't have the Wi-Fi access. At the top of the description on this in Canvas, it says this is missing a dimension. And basically it is the length of this leg or length of the dovetail. So one of those two, we're going to have to come up with a number. As the designer, it's on you. And however you want to denote it, however you want to keep track of it, it's one of those, for future reference, I have to come back out of the assembly and say whatever this fits into, does it fit? Hopefully it's one of those things that is obvious, like blatantly obvious. There's this huge gap and the dovetail portion that it slides into, there's no way that's going to fit. What's bad is when it's really close and it may be off 10 or 20 thousandths and it looks right, but if you don't remember to go back and double check, make sure, it could be problematic. All right, so this is one of those places where I like to use the dimension tools, the Mark for drawing, and have it show up just a little bit different, something that jumps out at you in the sketch. So let's go up, over, around. Yeah, we can do all that. So this one I'll put on the corner and move over a little bit. And over, missed. So there was a perpendicular. And again, it's more of a habit. And one of the things that with the machining, even there's things that we're trying to engage in your memory, in the memory of your fingertips, that as it's controlling the mouse, as you're entering these values, that information is coming back to you in a way that that you can recognize some of those items out of the gate. So I did that really fast, and it generated what I expect to be a lot of errors. All right, so that one can be horizontal, but these are not going to be perpendicular. And notice that it went perpendicular to the other side, not perpendicular to that one. That one went perpendicular to that one. So it was what it recognized, and what I was looking for when I was sketching was the little boxes. Not so much that this highlighted and this highlighted, but that little yellow box that said it was going to be perpendicular to something. And that jumped out at me as I'm going to have to go back and make that correction or do something with it. All right, so if you're going at a reasonable pace and drawing this somewhat carefully, you have time to see those boxes. Hold down the mouse or hold down or hold off on the click until you've kind of looked at it and let it absorb or sink in exactly what it's telling you, what it's giving you in that visual feedback. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and leave those. I know that they're there, but I want to see what happens when we get into the dimensions and where some of the errors, or what the errors maybe look like. So we have a 20 here. So we'll stack those up, and a 20 here. And then we have a 26. And then the overall was 98.92. Sounds like a radio station. All right, so that gets me a bunch of my verticals. Let's go with the 148.33. And we'll go 42 and 15. So it's kind of haphazard. You know, I say it's maybe a little haphazard, that it's what I see, what's jumping out at me on the screen, and there is no rule that says you have to go clockwise around this thing, counterclockwise. You know, it's pretty much whatever dimensions, whatever makes sense to you at the time. Now, I could be painting myself into a monumental corner and not even know it. But I chose a strategy, I'm staying with it, and when I figure out that I painted myself in the corner, then I also know that I'm going to be able to back out of it, get rid of some of these dimensions or relations, and work through the process. So 50 was to the circle, the 109.33 goes to here. And 9.42. Okay, and 47 is from the top to the point. And then there was a 15 to here. And I'm getting close to seeing some of these going to fully defined. So a 12 here. And then we had the 30 back over here. And so that one shifting, that was a little bit of a visual clue. I wouldn't have expected that to move or to change as we added it. So 12. And then that one went the absolute wrong way. And I'm going to say, is it going to give it to me? 13.33. And what was depth of 15? All right, so as things move around, I'm not panicking. I'm not upset about the mismatches, the inversions, the strange going on. I'm just kind of reacting to them. So I still have a handful of dimensions that I can't put in, and the geometry is defined. So if I try to go back to put in the 30, for instance, this is where we're going to start to see I turned mine don't show for make driven, or what's the other one? Allowed to drive or make driven. This automatically went to a driven dimension on mine. Okay, so when that little box pops up and says, do you want to make this dimension driven? I click don't show. I'm looking for that little bit of a flicker, and that these lines being in the lighter gray, I know that that's driven. So I have a couple of choices. I want to see why that one was not cooperating. We already identified the perpendicular. Take that off. And then the other perpendicular. So the other thing that I can do is I don't expect there to be any perpendiculars or parallels in this design. So if I display delete and all in this sketch, I can scroll down through the display delete, and there's a perpendicular. Be careful of delete all, because everything goes away and you start from square one. Control Z is your friend. And we'll get back into the display delete. So right click on the perpendicular, delete, or delete on the keyboard, or just delete at the bottom. We'll come back through. There's a parallel. So those two being parallel are problematic. And I won't say it's just going to be perpendicular and parallel, but they are likely culprits of why you wouldn't get to go fully defined, or would start to have issues with your geometry. Distance 48 is gray at the bottom, which was the 51 that was locked in. So that's one that well, it's calling it suppressed. I don't know. Will it come back now? Ah, it will. Okay. I did not know that. So learned something new today. Suppressed is going to be the same as, if I come over here to other, read only and driven. If this is a driven dimension, then it will be in gray, and relations or other dimensions are driving it, or it is being driven by other geometry. So other and uncheck. And knowing where this is at, being able to manipulate it, there are times where you may want to do is this dimension higher priority? And so I can switch one from being the priority not driven, unchecked, to checked, and then come over and switch this one to the reverse, and see which one I want to generate the geometry with. The main difference is if this one is driven, I can't change it. Now that it is driving, I can get a modify box, and I can change that geometry. So lots of information going on in the background, tons of little things hidden here and there that I'm not expecting you to get in week 4 of our class. But start to pay attention as you're going through these boxes. What is, kind of looking at it with an eye on, well, what does this do? Or have I seen this before, and how can I utilize it, leverage it? Okay, so that perpendicular is gone, that perpendicular is gone. And so we have 6. And since it was selected, I went in the dimension, it gave it to me. And that one's going to be a little harder, so I'm going to use the scroll wheel mouse and see if I can get that little sliver. I probably would just drag it out of the way rather than chasing it, but there it is. And then we're down to the last one. I'm going to put the circle in. And circle is 36. Position was 50 off of the edge. All right, and this one's getting kind of busy, so 49.5. I'm not being, like really particular about the, okay, 49.5. There we go. About the dimensions being on top of one another. Mainly, it's still readable. I don't have clusters and groups on top of each other, so as long as I can identify, I can always come back and clean it up later. But the reality is this is convenient. When I get this over into the drawing, then I'll worry about putting my my details, my dimensions, the drafting portion in the drawing. Or if we're using the model-based definition, then I'll start making decisions on datums and how this is going to play out. All right, so the last one. If I grab the point and I see that it moves, it does not move up and down, it does not rotate, it's not inverting, well, not inverting until I get over here. It's not doing anything particularly strange, but let's see, this point is 42. And if I had to take a guess, it doesn't look the same length as, this doesn't look the same length as this. Don't have, let's see, 36. Best guess, 60. Oh, and I already had that one selected, so I need to escape back, get rid of that point out of the selection set. And we'll go 60. All right, so I want to denote that dimension somehow, some way. That is a problem. It's a future problem that I haven't caught up to yet. So this is where the dimension text and the icons over here are going to help. So on the dimension text, verify. Oh, if I can spell. In assembly. All right, and then let's put a nice obround around it. And then the other one is that we come into the modify box. The very last icon in the modify box is to mark dimension to be imported into drawing. All right, if you are still under the options and where was it, drawings, if you still have this checked, then you're seeing your dimensions in black. I'm seeing mine in purple because I unchecked that. And I'm gonna recommend that you try it this way, because the logic is that I go into the sketch and I seem to remember there was a problem with this. I don't know what it was, but if I have that marked, oh, and it didn't turn, so the other one is to right-click and mark for drawing. There we go. It turns to black where all the rest of the dimensions are in purple. So I go into this drawing, I open up the sheet, I put in this view, and I say import everything marked for the drawing. This should be the only thing that comes in. There's another icon right next to it that says bring in not marked for drawing, in which case everything else would come in. So my logic has always been, well, if everything's marked for the drawing, and then I have one that's not marked for the drawing, well, yeah, I can't explain my logic there. It's just the way that it kind of fell out, that when I do import these or import the dimension, I want to see the ones that I'm interested in, not everything else. All right, we go ahead and extrude that out. This one it's kind of the first challenge. So any questions on where I'm going with it? And that is 12. All right.
One question on that. If you go ahead and you find you want to change that dimension, can you show again how you go to that stage where it looks like that extruded and go back to open up the same sketch, like not a new sketch?
Right.
So you can edit what.
Okay. So the quickest way, if it's just one dimension, you're not going through and doing a lot, is to double click and double click. And maybe we decided that was 55. All right, that does not update instantly. We have to rebuild. And then I will see that go from 60 to 55. If you double click on the feature, you will also get the blue, and it will be buried in there somewhere, but you will get the blue dimension that is for the feature. If I change that, same thing, is it will update, but I have to rebuild to get it to, or it will update, and then after we do the rebuild, it'll show the new model geometry. So let's see that face, and then the other is just to expand out, right click and edit sketch if you want to go through the icons, and that'll take you back in. Control 1 will put you, well in this case the front view, but Control 8 would put you normal 2 if it was an oddball orientation. And under the feature is, instead of editing the feature, you would come over to the edit the sketch. So 4 ways to do everything, 5 ways to do everything. One of those is going to make sense. The last one is that you can come over and edit the sketch on the feature, and it'll let you back into the geometry. So in this case, we're just kind of concerned with this one, I would say double clicking and getting all of those dimensions up without going back into the sketch, even though I would have to hit the rebuild or the Control B or the Control Q. You know, again, way too many options. I'd rather tell you just always hit Control B or always hit the little stoplight up here when you're telling it to rebuild. But you need to be aware of those other selections. You know, if you hit something accidentally on the keyboard, what did it do? All right, so getting back into the sketches, getting back into the features, everything's going to be pretty much on the right mouse button and waiting for the tooltip to come up, edit feature, edit sketch. Those are going to give you kind of the clue of where to go. All right. Oh, so I was going to new. Let's see, did I open one? Nope, only one file open, so new. And we have the sidebar from last semester, so I will open it up. And this one goes in and assumes we're going to use the view palette. So under the view palette, I only have one file open. It shows me the preview. There is my front view. It goes into the projection, top view, isometric view. We can go crazy with all of the views. All right, but the main one is that when I select and come over to model items, and we'll start into the drawings probably with chapter 2. I'll start inputting these. The drawings themselves are if you're interested. Chapter 4, we take the end of chapter 3 and we go through this process. So I want you to see it early and often, but you don't have to until chapter 4. If you want to, then it's a good part of the workflow and practice to go ahead and put this into a drawing template and just get used to that process of stepping through. So because the dimensions are marked for drawing and not marked for drawing, when I hit OK, so just import from and try it. So apparently I missed. Oops. It came up with the dimension, but it did come through, but it didn't. It came in inches. So let's verify that real quick. I'm going to go to the dual dimension just for that item. Expand it out. Well, this is going to switch it over. No, we're in. So even though I didn't get the note for the verify and assembly, I did get one dimension to come across that is, oh, there's something going on here that I need to go back and check. All right, so I don't know. Let's see if, to make this more complicated, let's take it out of here and put it with the dimension, which usually barks an error. And I'll save it. And the associativity should bring it over. Okay, so not sure why the text didn't come over. Well, it's in a separate box, so I kind of do know why it didn't come over. But all right, so I got the 55. I've got the inch dimension, and then I've got my note to verify. And then we can go ahead and put the rest of the dimensions, views, whatever we need into the drawing. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and save that in my group. The drawing is a SLD DRW, solid drawing. And did it go to the same place? Yes. So we can close those. All right. More pattern, more mirror. All right. So most everybody that's gotten to this one has pretty much the same question. Is we draw half of this. We're going to mirror it across the center line, so a good place for the origin is either on this end or this end. When you get to the circular, we're at another one of those linear patterns. So with having a center line down through the middle, if I tell this to dimension my x dimension, then I'm going to have a center line on top of a center line. I just need to recognize that that underdefined or somehow I need to get those that recognize or recognize that it's going to put one on top of the other. That's kind of the way we're going to go with it. And then object is symmetrical about the center line, so we can use that. And this is in inches. New, part inch fractional, front plane, and it's going to be fine to go through. There may come a point where all right, so I'm in construction line, infinite length. There may be times where you want to go into the right plane, you want to go into the top plane. Those are all available. It's just kind of front is going to be the quick choice. And so let's see, insert line, construction, horizontal, or construction, infinite length, drop it on the origin. And then we can back out of it, but most of the time I'll just select. It's easier to select out of it, get out of the construction line, and then we'll go into our object geometry. So line, and then up, over, back, and this has a lot of steps in it, so bound to miss one. Let's see if we can find a parallel. So there would be that parallel that would cause me problems. Don't really have, I know I can get to a perpendicular here somewhere. Okay, so there would be a perpendicular, but I'm not really going that way, so more of an example. Over, and there was a perpendicular. Down. All right, so it's showing me in the white that it's horizontal. It is going to infer vertical, but the horizontal is just a reference. So we'll come a little bit past, over, up, back. That's an interesting one for perpendicular. Over, back, and just to center line. All right, so when I'm using symmetry, I draw the half. If we were doing the dynamic mirror where everything was being created on the other side, then I can run into maybe a few more problems. But my strategy is that I'm going to apply these dimensions to 1/2. I get it to go fully defined. When I mirror it, it's fully defined. I don't have any secondary steps. I still have metric on the brain, 0.50. All right, and then 1.31. And then for the depth, 0.69. All right, so because the construction line was pre-selected or still selected, when I picked the next line, it automatically went to an angle. So I'm going to escape out of that. I probably could have stayed in that. That would have been all right. And 0.69. I also could have gone from horizontal line to horizontal line. Let's see. So we've got those. On the back side then, 0.28. And it's kind of weird operating upside down, but 0.65. Just reverse the dimensions. And 1.46. All right, and there was, okay, so that was the 0.65, 0.2. All right, I think we're good that way. So we had the 0.5 and 1.45. All right, so if I do this all as baseline dimension off the datum, this is going to get kind of busy. So the alternate, when we go over to Ordinate for the, well, it's going to be in the next couple anyway. We would clean this up a little bit using Ordinate dimensions rather than having all of these stacked up. 2.43, so even though that kind of inverted on itself, not too bad. 5.5 as an overall. And then where do we go? 3.35. Okay, so getting that kind of cleaned up. And 4.27. So none of those did I really recognize as, well, the 5.5, but none of those are close to fractional. Maybe the 11/16ths could come out, but given the complexity of the shape, not a big deal to start looking at stack up of fractions. All right, window pick from right to left gets everything crossing the window. So all of my geometry and the center line, as long as there is only one center line, mirror entities, gives me the desired result. Dimensions excluded. All right. If I go the other route and I go from left to right, or I right click and select chain, I get my geometry, but I haven't picked a center line yet. So when I go into mirror entities, it's going to ask me for the mirror about, jump down into that box. It shows me the preview. So the advantage of doing the mirror entities without, or in the case where I had another construction line, center line in place, it would force me to fill in that, pick the item you want to mirror about. And then we're right into features, extrude, and 0.875. All right. So this is kind of one of those, the sketch is complicated enough that I really don't want to put the linear pattern in. But I mentioned putting the object lines or the center line on top of the other one, so we'll go ahead. So normally I would get out of this and go ahead and make the holes a separate feature. So you're going to put in the first instance, get it pretty much defined location. We have half an inch 6 times, and first location is 0.94. So there we go with 15/16. So what's that? 0.937594. There we go. All right. So first one's in position. If we go into the linear sketch pattern, and well, we need to give it something. Let's see. So 5 times 0.75. There's going to be a total of 6 objects, and distance between the objects 0.75. So the hole call out 6 times half an inch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a spacing of 0.75. So basically what I'm looking at is the 5 times 3 3/4 for a total of 375. we can use whatever combination we want out of those two dimensions. Since the 375 is in parentheses, I'm going to treat that as a reference. 0.75 has priority. Okay, I'm dimensioning the X spacing, and it is at 0 degrees. And it jumped to fully defined. It never does that. All right, well, what I'd be looking for if it didn't is this point coincident with my center line? And so if I take that relation off as an example, the diagnostic tool for it would be to grab. I just took it off of the endpoint of my other center line. See if I can grab that. Nope. Yeah, it's picking all of them. So it's pretty much the center line, and the problem with the center line on top of a center line is how do I select that? There's not really a control select and alt select. I know it's there. I didn't know that alt would give me the region. And then selection tools, is there a select other?
At the top, the left.
Okay, so that's way too many steps. But yes, you can select other, and line 1 or line 2. If I really had to have it, most of the time I would be deleting stuff by now. So we go back, go ahead and accept, because it's singly nested. It puts the holes through. And then this was 13. Okay, another one with the pattern. We'll do this one as a separate pattern, and I really want to get into the 1-15, which has the table. So we'll go ahead and finish this one out. And it is in metric. Front plane, sketch, line, and sort of a miss. Okay, total miss because it didn't let me start. Up, over, back. And then angle, over. And then as you get more geometry, you get more inference lines. And things can get a little more complicated. All right, so I'm trying to sketch these out to kind of illustrate the point, as well as I don't have to do the complete perimeter. I can do a block of geometry, and that's what we'll do on the next one. So in contrast, I'm going around the perimeter because in certain cases it's going to be more complicated. If I just drew these first 4 or 5 lines and got them to go fully defined, and then the next 2 or 3, that may make it more manageable. But I know the tendency is I see a shape, I want to create that shape. All right, so just be aware that some of the shapes that you get into as they get more complex, you may want to break it into smaller, more manageable chunks. So let's see, 60, 70, and 180. See if we can get some good inversion going on here. So 53.9, I don't know that I'm going to be able to get this to come back with just dimensions. 0.99. Well, maybe 330. And then let's go with a couple of verticals, 19.53. And what did we have? 10 for the step. All right, so that's starting to come in. This one should be a good inversion, so 110. Moved everything out with it. And 80. So it's figuring it out. So I would say in previous versions you'd have more of a tendency that as you made these adjustments and things moved, that instead of moving as groups, they would basically overlap each other, become a little stranger to work with. 37.88. $53.99. All right, and so I think I've exhausted my dimensions. All right, so I know that there's a few left, but if I grab one of these and drag, there's a clue. It doesn't move left to right, it moves up and down. So that would be a good one to either go line to line and collinear, or line and point and go coincident. Both of those will have the same net effect. All right, brings it to location. Now that one's not moving. The other one was a dimension that I missed. Do I want it to be the same as the 10 here, or be dimensioned independently? Depends on what I think that those two objects are going to do, those two pieces of geometry. Okay, so 10. Missed a whole bunch of the vertical dimensions, so let's see, 37.19. Well, let's just see what happens when we go to move. All right, so the angle's changing, we get inversion, the shading goes away. And so as soon as I go from a single enclosed region to multiple regions, so 1, 2, 3, then the shading drops off. So you have this instant visual clue that we're overlapping or we have an opening somewhere. So let's see, 37.19 and 12.81. All right, and then I think that, yeah, that went fully defined. Okay, so extrude, and thickness of 12 millimeters. And then we've been letting everything come forward, right, so towards us. Keep in mind if you grab the arrow, it's going to drag. And then the way the scale works, which I don't use the scale very often, so I always have to look at it, is that as you get closer, then it goes into more resolution. So the thing with the scale is I really don't want to sit there and have to go, oh, there's 12. Okay, still missed. As I can get it close, and then visually we'll pick something up, but I can always reverse the directions. So right now it's going away from me. I click the toggle, it comes towards me, away from me, towards me. It just kind of depends on your intent. And then there's always, I want it for mid-plane. Maybe this is going to sit in the middle of something, and so it will put 6 to the back, 6 to the front. All right, and that could be an advantage going into the assembly, saying that in relation to another piece, this is going to be mid-plane on that piece and mid-plane to another piece, that they're going to share front planes. I could use that as a mate relation and speed up my assembly process. So try some of those different extrusion selections, where probably the blinding condition is going to be the most common, but try the mid plane, and you have to have other geometry for those metals. So just kind of experiment as you're going with and see what the results are. All right, so normal 2, back into a new sketch for the cut extrude for the holes, and it's 20 millimeters off, and overshot that one a little bit. 20 millimeters, 20 millimeters, and the shading's kind of, oh, that was the solid. I can go to wireframe, but as long as I have the solid and sketching on the solid geometry, I'm going to be with the shading. So, and then 30 off of the base. All right, so I get the first element, the first object in place, go into the linear sketch pattern, dimension the X spacing. It's 7 times 38, so the 7 is the number of spaces. We're going to give it the number of objects, which will be 8, which was 8 times 20. And we told it to do the dimension X spacing at 0 degrees. And that one came in fully defined as well. So it's making a liar out of me. So the difference is that this horizontal center line, it's still not getting going horizontal. So what is driving it? Coincident to the endpoint, coincident to the beginning. Dimension, maybe the vertical extension line. All right. So going forward, if all of your linear sketches come in fully defined, great, I'm happy for you. There are going to be times, though, with the dimension, if it does not calculate or however it's figuring out the logic to make this linear or to make this horizontal, and you're able to move it, that center line is one that you can force to be horizontal or vertical, depending on your orientation, and that would cause it to go fully defined. I'm going to really have to turn off my notifications. We'll give it a through all dimension or through all extrusion and finish the part out. Any questions? Oh, there's the 13. Oh, that's the 14. Okay, going into, and we're running a little bit long with this, so I'll finish up with this one. All right, so this is another one of those cases where up, over, around, and let's go ahead with just drawing a few of the segments because these angles are going to be problematic. Then we'll stop short, and getting over to this angle usually grabs one of these other angles, or those two angles grab an inference for parallel. So this is in metric. And we'll stay with the front plane. And up, over, step and angle, over, and then I want to watch out. So while I'm holding down the left mouse button, I'm actuating the scroll wheel so that I can get a slightly different position. And now there's my parallel. And there's the perpendicular and perpendicular. So I want to stay off of that parallel. And I left a gap. So that's going to be a little bit of an issue. All right, so 37.28. Height-wise, 32.47. And then 21.93. All right, not worried about the overall yet. To correct for the gap, we're just going to drag that in point and drag it to where it finds the concentric. But again, it's acting as a merge, so there's not really a relation that's going to show up. It just connected the dots. All right, and if you've seen the four-headed arrow, that is an indicator of probably more so here would be a good place. In fact, we'll use it there. When you select the endpoint and a line, this is saying that there's a projection. It's an angle extension. So let's go ahead and jump over to this one because we can actually make it, whoops. Okay, I wanted that dimension. I just did not want it right then. No, I guess I didn't want that dimension. So delete. All right. So the arrow endpoint to the angle. The arrow is the direction that I want my imaginary extension line for the point, and then go between. and that is 28.81. So in this case, it's probably not as effective because we have the vertical, and it would do the same thing. All right, but in a case where this was kind of floating out in space, or starting from a location that was not convenient to pick up, and at some point you're going to see that four-headed arrow, you're going to generate it whether you intended to or not. Be aware of what it's doing, and most of the time you can just hit escape and go back to your other dimensioning to pick it out. All right, so we've got that one. I need a line for the 230. All right, so 236. Let me apply that one again, because this one's probably the better example of. All right, so I pick between the two lines. If I want the included, I'm going to stay between. If we go, would that be the adjacent? All right, we have all of those available angles, and the smart dimension says wherever you place it, that's what you get. All right, so you're not locked into just wherever the first dimension shows up. Be ready to drag it around, and especially with the angles, be ready to drag and see what it's going to produce. All right, so 236.99. On that one, what am I missing? 2193. All right, so didn't quite get everything fully defined, but I got something manageable. Miss, down, angle, miss. So pretty much half. And we'll go back vertical there. Overall, 94.51. And 28.67. Overall height of 118. And let's go 40. And should start to see these get a few more fully defined. 60.74. And 40 degrees from the baseline to the angle. 40 degrees. Okay, so we got that one, got the angle. So here's one of those. We have the 94.51. I can see which dimension I'm missing. But here's one of those cases where I drag and actually missing two dimensions. So as it moves, it's giving me some indicator. Go back into the dimension. I can pick up. Well, that was one of those pre-select things. So since that point is pre-selected, I'm going to, from where I was dragging it, going to escape, make sure everything's clear, and then to 50. And to 19.3. So just that little bit of movement is kind of an indicator of where we can get this to go in fully defined. It's not always going to be apparent, but at least it points you in a direction. We'll go ahead and extrude. This one goes to 20 millimeters. And extrude. Open up the next sketch. Position the first hole. And these were all 10 millimeters in size. And we're going to use the ordinate, so I don't want to dimension just yet. I'm going to Control C, and then wherever I click, Control V, Control V, Control V, Control V, something like that. So I can get all of those in position. Now they're not related equal, so before I get any other geometry, and the advantage of doing this as a secondary sketch, a secondary feature, is that I can window pick and make them all equal. So let's double check and make sure I've got those equal. So it's not really important the order that it selected them to be equal. just that they're equal. So those two center points can be horizontal. Let's see, I think those are the only two. Well, we got these two for vertical. All right. So for my smart dimension, doing the pull down arrow, going into an ordinate. The ordinate dimension says that I don't have to be horizontal or vertical, I just have to pick an edge. And then we're going to go through each of the circles. To generate all of our X dimensions. Do the down arrow again, ordinate dimension. Now we'll be doing verticals. So all I'm really interested in is getting them applied, and then we'll figure out which one's A3, so 15 and 25. So if I go to extension line and accept, and then what was it, A5 is 38.51. A1, 1.22. And if I'm not sure, then I'm going to go to its extension line, highlight it, grab it, 57.14, so that's going to move it a little bit. And if we end up with, let's see, so A2 is that one. Try and cross some of these off the list rather than jumping around too much. 84.04. And then A2, 10.27. Okay, so that one was a duplicate. Since I already had the vertical dimension, so it can go away. And so what did we have? A6, 46.5. And then the vertical, 52.61. And then what's the last one? A7, 101.88. And then it picked up the same, or it didn't. No, it did, 46.5. Okay, through that dimension. All right, so they got kind of messed up, so we can go back into, if we needed to add a dimension, it would be add to ordinate. So right-clicking on any of the dimensions in the ordinate selection. Add to ordinate would let us put in another whole location. And we just pick whatever our geometry was. Or go into display options, and I want to rejog the ordinates to clean them up. Display option, rejog. So not quite what I had in mind, but there it goes. All right, so I know I flashed this up, but I did not show it. So pretty much with the table locations, since this is going along, we'll put this in a drawing on Thursday and generate this table. This table does not get generated inside of the part. It's for the drawing. Okay, what else do we have in this one? Tabs. All right. So this will get you in pretty good shape if you're still working on 1-2, and we'll pick it up on Thursday.